Good people, today's conversation is a special one. I'm sitting down with someone who represents strength, resilience, and a perspective I have yet to have here on my platform. My little sister in acromegaly, Megan Ryan. Megan is an outpatient registered dietitian who focuses on building long-term relationships with her patients while helping them make meaningful progress towards their health goals. In her spare time, she works as a fitness instructor teaching aerial yoga and rebounder classes. Isn't that cool? And has completed 4 marathons. While living with acromegaly herself, now think about that for a second. At 31 years old, at a stage in your life where most people are just getting started, figuring out their careers, building relationships, planning for the future, she's also navigating a rare disease that impacts her body, her identity, and her life. Yet, she's still passionate about connecting with others, especially those newly diagnosed, and offering encouragement and a sense of possibility. In addition to maintaining her clinical credentials as a registered dietitian, she is currently working towards becoming a certified trainer. Outside of it all, she enjoys time with her husband, family, 2 dogs, and whatever new adventures come next. Megan, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Welcome to Talking Acromegaly with Tony.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Megan, I am even more excited to have you here. So let's get into it. Take me back to the beginning. When did you first realize something wasn't right?
That is always the hardest question for me because it's so hard to pinpoint because of all the things I had going on in my life around that time. So I was diagnosed when I was 28. But realistically, I probably had symptoms for almost 10 years before that, but they were things that were really easily masked by marathon training. Like I noticed that my feet were bigger. I kept having to size up in my shoes, but endurance runners commonly encounter that as they increase mileage. Your feet get kind of inflamed and swell, so didn't really think much of that. I had extreme joint pain, but I played pretty much every sport I could get my hands on when I was in high school, so that always just kinda got brushed off. Um, I had started having really severe and hard to control headaches for a good while, but that was kind of attributed to stress or anxiety or, being a new professional and kind of settling into all of that stress, and a few other things. So I guess the point where my symptoms got significant enough that I couldn't really handle them anymore, I was probably about 26 or 27, but it had become something noticeable to me in everyday life for several years before that. It just wasn't really something that I felt like pressing the issue enough, to get an answer.
Sounds a little bit like my story. Hands and feet were getting bigger. I just pushed it off as to getting older, to weight gain, and just kind of thought that I'll get to it when I get to it. What was the moment you finally got answers, and what did that diagnosis feel like?
That's another loaded question because I just had the most interesting journey. So, at some point, I had started going to primary care with all of these weird symptoms, and again, they were just kinda all easily brushed off, and so, after my original provider moved to a different clinic, I switched doctors and started telling my new doctor about all of these problems I was having, and he kinda looked at it with fresh perspective and, really jumped in and was like, "None of this sounds right, and I don't know what's going on, but I know there's something wrong with you, and we need to figure this out." So, he sent me to endocrinology, I guess, about a year after I started seeing him, um, and I got initial blood work done whenever I got there, and I guess my endocrinologist suspected something on my first visit because she actually drew my growth hormone and my IGF-1 at the first visit with her. And I do remember her asking questions about how tall my family is because I'm extremely tall. I'm 6'2". So I had growth hormone and IGF-1 drawn, and a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail that said all of my labs were normal, and everything else had a result out beside it, but IGF-1 and growth hormone didn't have anything listed, but I didn't know anything about them at the time, so I just kinda shrugged it off. "Oh, okay, we'll keep going on." And so they told me to come back in 3 months, and so I went back to that appointment, and during the appointment, my doctor was looking through paper copies of records that she had gotten, and I saw this, like, shocked look on her face, and she um, kinda settled herself, I guess, and then said, "So we need to repeat some of the labs that you had done last time, and if they come back the way that I think they might, then you're gonna have an MRI of your brain, and we're gonna do a lot of other tests." Um and I'm pretty naturally inquisitive, and she wasn't ever really one that enjoyed any of my questions. She very much wanted to direct the conversation and didn't want a lot of input from me at times. So I started to ask questions about what we were looking for, and she was like, "No, we're not going to talk about that. I don't want you getting anything in your head until we know for sure what's going on." So they redrew labs that day, and I live in a pretty rural place, so it took almost 2 weeks for me to get results on my growth hormone IGF-1, and then almost immediately after that, they sent me for an MRI, but the day that she decided to redraw everything, she did write the word acromegaly on a piece of paper, and she handed it to me, and that was kinda my first encounter with the word or even seeing or hearing of anything like that before.
And what thought came into your head when you saw acromegaly on a piece of paper that she handed you? Did she explain anything? What happened after that?
She She did not. She was not an explainer by any means. It was always a quick, "Nope, we're not gonna talk about that until we know what's going on." I guess maybe she thought I would get panicked if I knew what was happening, so, as you do, she gave me this piece of paper with this word on it that I didn't know what it was, so we finished up the visit, I thanked her for her time, and then I went to my car and immediately Googled that because I mean, what else are you gonna do? Um, so I had gone to my appointment by myself. I'm really bad about not taking support people with me when I have any kind of health things going on. So I went to my car and Googled acromegaly and, what could have been this awful moment of recognizing how rare it is and all of the things going on. It was just this overwhelming sense of relief because it was so many of the symptoms that I had, like, it felt like somebody had been following me around, making a list of what I was experiencing, and that just felt really hopeful to me because it meant if it's all coming from one place and all being caused by the same thing, then if there's treatment for that, it could possibly resolve so many different things that are going wrong in my life right now instead of having to treat, 12 different illnesses that seemingly don't go together.
I get that. And with you being a registered dietitian, does that change how you approach your health by any means?
I I think in a lot of ways it may be the reverse of that. I think in a very strange way, I may have acromegaly to thank for becoming a registered dietitian, because my symptoms had started when I was so young. I was always an athlete, always active, but I was just one of those people that I would stay in the gym longer than everybody else. I typically ate a lot more balanced diet than a lot of people did, but I just gained weight so easily. And around the time that I started college, I started gaining weight and I really tightened up on my lifestyle patterns, got my weight back where I wanted it to be. And then I had to have orthopedic surgery. And after that, I just couldn't ever bounce back. I started gaining weight really aggressively. And by the time I actually found out that I had acromegaly, I weighed about 70 to 75 pounds more than I do right now. And so I was originally an elementary education major with a concentration in special ed, and my eating patterns were getting a little too restrictive. And my family made a really good suggestion and encouraged me to take a sports nutrition class as an elective. And about a month later, I called my parents and said, "Hey, would you guys be mad at me if I changed my major? Because I'm just in love with this class. I don't have to study for it at all. And I get excited to go to class. I kind of just soak up everything that I learn in there. And would it be the worst thing ever if I changed my major?" And my dad said, "Are you still on scholarship?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, then I guess that's your business, not ours. And it would be terrible if you completed a whole degree and then hated what your job was gonna be and always wondered what it would be like if you had changed your mind earlier." So they encouraged me to pursue it, and I think since then, my relationship with food has probably changed a lot, especially since my acromegaly diagnosis and getting appropriate treatment, um, because I have really internalized that idea of food as fuel and that bodies are worth so much more than what they look like on the outside and all of the amazing things that they can do. And it's not just the super simple equation of energy in versus energy out either makes me feel like I look great or makes me feel like I look terrible, right? You have to fuel your body for all of the wonderful things that it's doing for you that you never really know about until you have to.
I want to back up a little bit. You mentioned you weighed a lot more than you do now. Did
Mhm.
that weight loss start after you had your pituitary surgery?
So about a year prior to my diagnosis, when I had been working with my primary care doctor for a while and trying to get a lot of my other symptoms resolved, I had actually started taking weight loss medication at that point because I was so uncomfortable. I was just in pain all the time. I had also been diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome, so I was having problems with my blood sugar. And I don't know how much you know about PCOS, but weight gain is kind of a classic feature that goes with that as well. Um, so I did start taking that kind of medication, and then whenever I went to see the endocrinologist, I guess the second time when she started to suspect that I had acromegaly, um, she told me to stop taking that medication immediately. So I had lost about 50 pounds from what I had gained initially, and then she took me off of the medication, and I regained about 35 pounds in the few months between my diagnosis and when I had surgery. And then I know a lot of people do lose weight really rapidly after surgery, but I did not. I was also not in surgical remission. So, with all the steroids that I had to take immediately after surgery and those kind of things, I continued to gain weight for a while. Um, and I guess I really didn't start losing weight again until I had surgery in October of 2023. And I think I didn't really start losing weight again until maybe February or March of 2024.
Exactly when was your surgery and where did you have it at?
I had surgery in October of 2023, October 10th, and I remember because it was Columbus Day the day before, so I was off work. So Scott and I kind of had a just fun hangout day, tried to act like there wasn't this impending thing hanging over our heads. So I had surgery in Little Rock, Arkansas, with the Arkansas Neuroscience Institute.
Okay. You talked about how you and Scott were trying to keep your mind off the surgery. How was your surgery?
Yeah. Great question. Because all of my MRIs that I've had since then, nobody can see any residual tumor volume, but my IGF-1 did not drop that much after surgery. I think maybe the lowest it dropped on its own may have been either the lower 400s or upper 300s. Um, so as far as, length of stay in the hospital and recovery and all of those kind of things, I feel like I had a much easier experience than a lot of other people did. I had surgery on, I think, a Tuesday, and I was home by Friday. I didn't have any of the major complications that a lot of people experience. I progressed back through pretty quickly. I think I was off work for 6 weeks, and then I was able to go back. Um, but I had only met one other person who had acromegaly before I had surgery, and it just happened to be, a girl that I work with, and I had a mutual friend who also had acromegaly, and she went into remission right after surgery. So I had kind of, I guess, led myself to believe that that was the normal outcome. So it was a little bit more difficult mentally when I started to understand that a lot of times immediate remission is not the case, and it wasn't just gonna be this pop in, pop out, I had surgery, now I'm cured, and life can go back to normal kinda situation.
Yes, that was a surprise to me as well. Let me ask you this. Are there specific nutrition principles or habits that have helped you manage symptoms or feel better overall as a registered dietitian that you've used for yourself?
Yeah, I think I do put a lot more emphasis on just nutrient density of the things that I eat in general now. I think we know that the standard American diet is something that's kind of categorized as being, pro-inflammatory with a lot of processed foods and fried foods and things like that. So in general, I eat probably a little bit more protein than average. I put a lot of emphasis on fiber intake, trying to balance out fruits and vegetables, not eating fast food or things like that on a regular basis. And then, kind of as I guess, comorbidities now. I've had some issues with my blood sugar or things of that nature, so it makes it a lot more important to keep my diet really balanced, especially with my activity level. Aside from teaching fitness classes, I go to the gym pretty much every day, sometimes twice a day. So it really becomes important to think of food as fuel instead of just something that you haphazardly choose.
You mentioned going to to the gym quite often and that you're a fitness instructor. Has acromegaly interrupted or reshaped your life in any way?
It definitely has, and it's been quite the journey to get back to this point. So, prior to diagnosis, I was normally pretty active, but I had gotten to the point, before I had surgery that I was just so extremely exhausted all the time that I had stopped going to the gym, and my bones and my joints would just ache all the time. So it was not uncommon for me to come home from work and get ready and go to bed at like 5 PM. So I guess I really didn't get back into going to the gym regularly until about 6 months after I had surgery. Um, so initially after surgery, my first endocrinologist didn't want to start me on any kind of medications yet. And just kind of seemed like we weren't incredibly aligned on a lot of things. So I switched endocrinologists. And with some of the treatments that my new doctor put me on, I started to feel significantly better pretty soon afterward. And I actually found a bungee fitness studio in my community, and I had never heard of that before. And so I started reading a lot about it, and it's essentially a high intensity cardio workout, but you are attached to a system of bungee cords that are tethered into the ceiling, and you wear this belt that kinda looks like a fall harness, and what it does is it takes a lot of the load off of your joints, so essentially all of the resistance is kinda being pulled against those cords that are tethered to the ceiling, and so it gets adjusted based on your current weight and things like that. So I was able to get back into a lot of the movements that I had lost because of my joint pain. So then I was able to do like squats and lunges and run a little bit and a lot of things that I didn't know if I would ever get back. And it was so fun that I just got addicted to it. And it didn't take very long of me going there to be like that person that was there every time the door was open.
I'm so happy that you've able to find something that brings you joy, something that keeps you happy, coming from a point where you would get off work and go home and go to sleep. With that said, did you ever feel like people around you didn't fully understand what you were dealing with because you're young and you look healthy?
Absolutely. And I think it is maybe a little bit different when you are younger. And people don't mean anything by it. They're not really trying to be rude, but you don't just jump out there and explain your entire medical history to every person you know. So, especially with the joint pain and the fatigue and all those kind of things, it was really common if I, ever mentioned something about being tired or being sore or saying, "Oh, I can't really get down on the floor and do that and then get back up." Um, People are quick to say, "Oh, well, if you're 20 something and you feel like that now, just wait until you're my age," right? Um, and I I'm just one of those people, I don't really like being perceived as being unhappy or being ungrateful or any of those kind of things. And so at some point, it just kind of became something that I would take out of the conversation because I felt like I was, being annoying or disrespectful of these other people if I said something about, pain or fatigue or one of those kind of things. So I just kind of made a habit of not bringing that into the conversation. And it did feel really isolating because if you're around people that are your own age, they're not struggling with those kind of things. But if you're around people who are struggling with the same things that you are, they kind of question the validity of it. And it it always pops in my mind, that joke of being a soft millennial, right? Everybody thinks that my age range of people, we just can't cope with anything. And so that was always what was going through my mind. Anytime somebody said, "Oh, well, just wait until you're my age," right?
Well, just wait until you're my age and you won't care about any of that anymore. I don't care about what anybody says. It doesn't even bother me. You'll get there. It's coming. What are some of the day-to-day challenges that you go through that people don't see?
Oh, that's a good one. So, I think probably the biggest one is just kind of trying to differentiate between things that are normal everyday aches and pains versus symptoms that I should be concerned about, right? It's kind of like, is that the red flag that I need to call somebody? Is something new happening? Is something worsening? Um, and also just kind of some of the things that come with acromegaly, like, my joints are a little bit worse than the average person my age. I do have consistent issues with my blood sugar now, so I can't just run out and go have fun and just, be 30 and go do whatever I want to all day long and, just forget to eat or those kind of things. I mean, I still do it quite a bit. Um, Shout out to my husband for keeping me alive, and always having snacks and reminding me to eat, those kinda things, but, um, also, I guess, like, having to take medication on a regular schedule, and being in a phase of life where a lot of people around me, um, don't really understand that for some people, some medications are vital, and kind of that mindset of, well, if we were just more holistically minded, or we changed something about our routine, or drank more water, or did yoga, or some of those kind of things, maybe we wouldn't have to take medication anymore. And it's like, it's a really great idea, but some conditions don't work that way. So just little things here and there that kind of make you feel separated from the crowd, I guess.
Yeah, I've gone through that and I've had different conversations with people about exercising and acupuncture and things of that nature. And I'm at the point, and I tell them my joints are past all of that. Believe me, you don't understand. I want to take a step back a little bit. You mentioned Scott. You mentioned your husband.
Yes.
Has your acromegaly impacted your relationship and your marriage in any way, shape, or form?
I'm gonna sound so cheesy, but I think the biggest way that it's had an impact on all of that is just to make me recognize more that he is exactly the person that I always prayed for. Like, he's always there to be supportive, even when, other friends or loved ones or whoever, they they want to be supportive, but they wanna be supportive in the way that makes sense to them. That's never what he does. He always asks what I need, how he can help, what today holds. Is it different than what happened yesterday? Um, and if I say, "I'm sorry, I'm just so difficult to deal with," he's like, "You're not difficult to deal with. I picked you. I chose life with you, and my life would be so much harder if you weren't in it, and I will do anything to help you or make you feel better." And he's just been the biggest cheerleader that I could ever ask for, which probably sounds a little silly for anybody that knows him because he is a little stoic, a little reserved. Um, but it just really, really solidified that he will always be my person. He will always be in my corner. Um, and he'll go to the ends of the earth for anything I need.
You're bringing me to tears here. He'll go to the ends of the earth for you. Okay, great guy. I had the pleasure of meeting Scott. He is stoic, he is reserved, but he is a great guy. You all have had to have conversations about the future, right? Has
Mhm.
acromegaly impacted how you all think about starting a family or having children by any means?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of different ways, even before we knew that it was acromegaly, because like I said, before I found out that I had acromegaly, I had also been diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome. So I had had to have surgery for that, probably, I guess, about a year before I found out I had acromegaly. And it was kind of one of those things that it wasn't so much of a big deal. And then once it became a problem and I found out I was going to have that surgery, there was a whole conversation of, "Oh, well, we hope we can, save this ovary that you're having surgery on, but if not, there's still a pretty good chance that you would be able to have children in the future if you lose that, but there's no guarantee." And it was kinda just displayed very in a very straightforward manner when I had not had that on my radar at all. I was like, "Oh, we're just gonna take this cyst out, and then everything's gonna go back to normal." So I guess I didn't really grasp the severity of the situation at that point, and so we had to cope with that and kind of, wrap our heads around what that would look like if we didn't have the opportunity to have a family bigger than the 2 of us after I had that surgery, and then it was successful. I didn't have any complications, but there was still a chance that, PCOS could make it not much of a possibility. Um, and then when I went to the first endocrinologist, she asked me during my initial visit, she said, "So you're 27." And I remember because it was the day before my 28th birthday. And she said, "So you're 27." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "And you don't have any children?" I said, "No, not yet. We're still kind of getting set in our careers and figuring out what we want for our family." And she said, "Well, that means you have 3 years and you need to hurry up and do that because if you have PCOS, you're not gonna have any kids after you're 30." And it really stuck in there because in my mind, I was like, "Oh, that means I actually have 2 years because I'll be 28 tomorrow." Um, and that was a bit of a moment. I had gone into that appointment by myself. He he came with me, but he stayed in the car because he had a meeting that he had to call into. And I was like, "Oh, no, I don't need you to go on an appointment with me." I was just, we went together so we could go to dinner afterward and whatever. And I walked out to the car in tears about this thing that I already knew I had, but this person was just very calloused about it and nonchalant, like, "Oh, hurry up and get on that or it's not gonna happen." So we readjusted our expectations all over again. And then after I had surgery for acromegaly, it just kinda nonchalantly got mentioned again that that was probably something that was back on the table. So we did go to reproductive endocrinology at that point and talked to a doctor there, and kind of talked through our options. And even then, he was very reserved about what our chances would be like just because of the type of medications that you have to take for acromegaly, and that there's not a lot of information available about how that could affect you during pregnancy. But since I'm not well controlled without medication, there was also concern that if I stopped taking medication because we wanted to start a family, would that disrupt everything to the point that it could be detrimental to a baby too? So I think we've put a lot more consideration into that whole discussion than many people our age have. Um, and still not quite sure where we've landed on that, but
Okay.
it's definitely something that we talk about a lot. And depending on the day or the week, the opinion might change. So I think it's one of those things that we'll continue to pray about it, and whatever the best answer is may not be what we expected, but it'll be what we need.
I appreciate you going in detail about that. That was very courageous of you to just talk about this. And you've got a phenomenal husband. He's very supportive. I am thankful that I have a very supportive wife who helps me as well. For someone listening who may be afraid of how an acromegaly diagnosis could affect their relationship, what would you say to them?
I would say I think the biggest mistake that I make in relationships, either with him or with my parents or the rest of my family, is that I tried so hard to kind of shield the people that I loved from all of the pieces of the conversation, because I just don't like to be sad about things. And so in a lot of cases, I have this mindset of kinda just perk yourself back up, fake it until you make it, and it works really well for me until it doesn't. And then I just kinda crash and it all hits me at once. But a lot of times I'll kinda, deal with that by myself, because that's not a burden that's supposed to be for other people. And so especially prior to surgery, anytime somebody in my family tried to express any kind of concern, I was just like, "No, it's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. We don't need to worry about that right now. I really need you to stop being negative. This is not what I want." And I think that was really selfish in a lot of ways, and it didn't really hit me until I think one day my dad actually said something about it, like, "We're allowed to be sad too. We all love you with our whole hearts, in different ways. And just because you don't want to feel like this is some sort of grief because you do have faith that we're going to make it through this and everything's going to be okay, that's fine. But it's still something for the people that love you to handle, to see that this really unexpected thing is happening and it's heavily affecting your life and it could affect your health further into the future. And it's just not easy to see somebody that you love going through that. So we need to have some space to be a little bit angry or a little bit confused and process it how we need to as well. Because in the nicest way possible, it's not just all about you, even though you're the person that it's happening to.
Our stories are very similar. I went through a period of non acceptance and I kept it away from my family. And it got to a point where it was being unfair to them. I wasn't taking care of my health. I knew I had acromegaly. I was avoiding going back to the doctor. And even after the surgery, I went through a period of where I wasn't taking my medication regularly. I didn't want to talk about it, but they have feelings too, right? They knew something was going on with me, like just like your family and your dad did. So I totally understand how you felt about that. With that said, you had a lot to deal with mentally. Acromegaly can change your physical appearance. Has that affected your self image at this stage in your life? And have you had any physical changes in appearance?
I have had a lot of physical changes, and that was actually one of the first things that I noticed, while I was in college, I think. So, um, the school that I went to was about an hour and a half away from where I grew up, so I would typically come home for the weekends, and I remember at some point I started pointing it out to my family, like, "Something's wrong with my face. I don't know quite what's wrong with it, but, like, it just looks harsh," things like that. And, they didn't know. There wasn't any way for them to know. So they were super reassuring. And at that point, I was probably 18, 19. And so, realistic expectation too. They would say things like, well, your face isn't supposed to stay soft forever. You're not supposed to have a baby face forever. This is just what your adult face looks like. And it's not a bad face. It's just not what you're used to. And I think that probably got emphasized a little bit more just because I've never been a person who has a lot of self-confidence, which might be surprising. My best friend, Angela, who we were talking about that not too long ago, and she was like, "It always stuns me when you say that because you seem like a person who has confidence." But I think I can be confident when the conversation is important, but just based on what there is about me to be confident about, I've never really been one of those people. I didn't feel super confident in what my face looked like before acromegaly, but as it began to change, I got really insecure about it. I didn't like to be in pictures. Specifically, like my jaw has gotten a lot wider over time. My forehead is a lot more pronounced. My jaw actually grew more on one side than it did on the other. So my smile and all those kind of things are a little bit uneven. But probably the biggest way that it impacted my appearance in the short term was just that I gained so much weight. Um, and so it really kind of made me feel withdrawn, and there's still a lot of time that I walk past a mirror or, take a selfie or see a picture that somebody else has taken when I wasn't expecting it. And it still feels like it's not my face. Um, but one thing that I've really leaned into, especially over the last couple of years and getting to actually meet some other friends in person who have acromegaly, is the features are a commonality, even though we don't all have all of them. And I just think it's the greatest thing ever to stop and think of it like it makes us like a family, right? Because I have physical resemblances to my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and uncles or whoever. Um, but, you and I, we call each other brother and sister, right? And we have some physical similarities because of acromegaly. And I just think that's kind of the greatest thing ever, that I have all of these amazing people that I love and they kind of look like me.
Yes, we do look alike, and you will be my sister forever. You're not going anywhere.
Yes. Yes.
What has this journey done for you mentally and emotionally?
Mhm. I think mentally and emotionally, it's made me more aware that it's okay to not be 100% okay about everything all the time. And I think even right after surgery, I thought I was doing really well, and in reality, I wasn't. Um, but I just kind of tried to brush it off, tried to convince myself that, at the time that I had surgery, it was October. So I was like, well, I'm just sad because it's winter, or I'm sad because I can't exercise as much as I want to, or, fill in the blank with whatever, realistic reason I could come up with that I didn't really feel like myself at the time, because I had this mindset that acromegaly wasn't as bad as XYZ other thing
Okay.
that I could think of. And in my mind, it felt like it was being disrespectful to other people if I acknowledged that I was upset that I was dealing with it. And so over time, I've learned that you can be upset about something, but still see the best in the situation. And bless Scott, I know I'm just real cheesy with how great he is. But one of the things that he's consistently said over time since I've started to feel that way is you have to remember that feeling better is not the same thing as feeling well. And so a lot of times when I'm kind of down about, well, I feel better than I did a month ago. I feel better than I did a year ago. So why can I not just be happy and be grateful and, love every single moment of life right now?
Scott is a wonderful guy. Scott's my man.
Yes,
I'm about to ask you a
he's the best.
question that people who don't live with a rare condition won't understand, Megan. You ready?
Go
Okay.
for it.
What's the best thing about having acromegaly that has happened to you, if that makes sense?
It does. And I think about it a lot. It's probably one of the conversations that I have the most often. And like you said, other people don't understand it. But I think it's all of the people that I've met. Um, Genuinely, out of all the people that I've met in the acromegaly community, I have never met such a large group of people that are so collectively concerned with the impact of what's happening to them outside of themselves. Like almost every person that I've ever met with acromegaly will tell you some of the same things that I've just said. They're not somebody who enjoys talking about their life story. They're not the most confident person. They're not, somebody who grew up with this goal of being involved in scientific research. They're not somebody who goes out of their way to meet strangers and welcome them in. But all of that changes when you realize that sharing your story with somebody else could make their life better. Or, years from now, this could be a diagnosis that doesn't feel life altering to somebody else. So it gives you this sense of anything you do for awareness is part of something that's much bigger than yourself. And you see your friends and these people that you grow to love like family, and you recognize that you would do anything for them to not have to live through the difficult things that they've experienced in life. And I don't know if it's this way for you, but to me, whenever I think of all of my friends that have acromegaly, I feel like all of their journeys have been so much harder than mine. So it feels like, in a way, you owe it to them to do anything to make their life better. And I also think about all of the people that have come before me. Some of them are people who I get to call friends now, who are, still with us and very active and vibrant and doing all of the things. But, people in generations who have come before us that allowed their body to be used by science so that physicians can learn more about acromegaly and how to treat it, or all of those kind of things. And I think I've allowed myself to go on adventures and do things that I maybe wouldn't have done otherwise because it's a chance to connect with other people in the community, and you don't want to squander that opportunity. So you do that and you end up with this really amazing experience on top of it. Um, and I think it's made me a little bit more bold, um, a little bit more open to putting my foot down when people don't treat me how I should be treated, especially in the context of medical appointments and things like that. Because I used to be a bit of a doormat person, and I still kind of am in a lot of ways, but it's just a journey of growing through all of those things.
It seems like you've learned to advocate for yourself nowadays, in other
Uh,
words.
I think that's probably the best word for it.
I feel pretty much exactly the same way you do about our acromegaly community, our acromegaly family. The best thing about my diagnosis was the friendships that I've built, the relationships that I have. I never thought that I would be a guy in front of a camera doing a podcast, but I felt it was needed and I wanted to be part of the change. I wanted to be helping people feel better about themselves after being diagnosed with this. What does healing mean or feel like to you today?
I think healing feels like recognizing that life can be a lot different than what you expected or what you hoped for, but it doesn't mean that you can't still take every opportunity to build it into the best possible version that you have. Um, because life doesn't look like what I expected it to at this point, but in so many ways, it's so much better. And I think that comes with the opportunity to, look at the situation that you're given and say, okay, there are a lot of things about this that I can't change, but I am, to an extent, in charge of my own happiness. So I'm going to choose what makes me upset. I'm going to choose how I respond to the situation, and I'm going to choose to be joyful regardless of the circumstances.
What I'd like for you to do right now, Megan, is finish this sentence for me. Living with acromegaly has shown me that
I can go through hard things and still be myself.
you and I both, and I thought that this journey would be a whole lot harder than what it has been. I thought that my surgery would be the end of me. And having conversations with people who have upcoming surgeries and the anxiety that they are dealing with, I try to calm them and tell them it's okay. Once the hardest part is all the preparation leading up to the surgery. After my surgery was done, there was the recovery period, but I felt at ease and the fear of the unknown was over. And I was so happy for that. And I try to get that message across to others. And I've had some success with it. And I'm very thankful that people have been open. I get a lot of people nowadays who reach out for advice and I'm open to give it if you're able to help one person who feels like something isn't right but doesn't have the answers yet. What would you say to them?
I would say you owe it to yourself to figure out what that is. That it may be nothing, but letting somebody tell you that something is not wrong with you when you know it is, um, that doesn't have to be the end of the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that I carry in my heart the most is that my primary care doctor was the first person who just listened to what I had to say and didn't try to brush any of it off and say, well, that happened because of this, and that happened because of this, and that happened because of this, and we don't need to go anywhere else with it, right? It- Getting that person that says, well, let's put all of these pieces together and see if they make something as a whole, not just all the separate parts. And if they don't, that's great. But you owe it to yourself to pursue that and find people that will pursue it with you until you have an answer.
Great advice. I love it. On that note, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for your time today. But most importantly, I want to thank you for talking acromegaly with Tony. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for your time. I really looked forward to this. I always love our conversations. Thank you for inviting me.
Again, the pleasure is all mine. In closing, Megan, you are an amazing woman. It takes strength, courage, and confidence that you do have to come here and share your story. I am certain that by you sharing your story, you've given someone the strength, courage, and confidence that they need to share theirs as well. If anyone out there has found interest in this episode, drop a comment, share it, like it, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all my social media platforms. If you're preparing for pituitary surgery and you're looking for some solid information, click here and you can watch my conversation with someone I call the Magic Man, Dr. JFM. And no, the M doesn't stand for magic. However, he definitely makes pituitary tumors disappear. Thanks for watching.